found that there were antibodies produced against VP2, 3, and 5 in serum. The second thing we did was to do a virus neutralization titer assay. And essentially, that means looking to see whether the antibodies that were produced can actually stop virus from entering mammalian cells. So the way this works, just briefly, is that you mix a serotype-specific virus. So in our case, it was serotype 5 virus, and this is all done in a BSL-3 lab. And you take several dilutions of the serum, okay? And you add that to susceptible animal cells. So it's sort of essentially an in vitro assay. And then you count the number of viable cells, and you record the serum dilution at which 50% of the cells are dead. So essentially, if you have antibodies in your serum that recognize the virus, in our case it was serotype virus, the antibodies will bind to the virus, and they will stop, which will stop the virus from moving into your cells once you've added them. But if you have antibodies that don't recognize the virus, your antibodies won't bind to it, and your virus will be free to enter into the cells. And then you count, and then obviously the cells die, and then you can count the number of cells that are dead and the number that are alive. And that's where you get your serum, what they call neutralization titer from, which is the number of the titer of the antibodies, which will cause 50% cell death. And for instance, if you look here with our results for the guinea pigs serum, essentially we actually looked at serotype virus 5 as well as 8, because serotype 5 is meant to cross-protect against 8, and then also serotype 4, because we needed a negative control. And if you look at the serum from animals that were vaccinated with the plant vaccine, we were very pleased to see we got extremely high titers for serotype 5. We got less titers, but we got them nonetheless for serotype 8, which showed there was some kind of cross-protection happening. And we got nothing for serotype 4, which is what we expected. And again, for the control, which was the serum from guinea pigs which were not vaccinated with the vaccine, all of them were negative, which was also what we expected. Interestingly, if you look at the OVP vaccine, so this is now serum that contains from animals that were vaccinated with the vaccine. They had titers which were a lot lower than VLP vaccine, certainly for the more specific serotype. That we had titers for all of them, which you would expect, because the vaccine obviously you've got all the serotypes represented there. So we showed from this work that it was, first of all, our VLP preparation was very safe. Secondly, the highly neutralizing antibodies were produced in the guinea pigs, and also, even more pleasingly, there was some kind of cross-protection against the serotype 8. And we published this work in the Applied Biotechnology Journal. But having done that, we decided, okay, well, now if we've shown that it's safe and that does stimulate neutralizing antibodies, we'd like to test it in horses. So after a lot of searching around, we eventually found some horses that are housed at the South African Medical Research Council Primate Unit in Delft Animal Centre. Essentially, it's a centre where they kind of adopt horses that horse owners no longer can afford to look after, or they're moving somewhere else and they need to find a home for them. And we were assured by the vet that they were naive. So that's the other thing, we were looking for horses that hadn't been pre-exposed to African horse sickness. The whole thing involved an incredible amount of paperwork. We had to get ethics from all sorts of different committees. I had to get a state permit, or permit from the state vet. I had to get the DAF. But anyway, eventually we managed to do that. And the first thing we did was we decided, well, we better have a look and just check whether these horses are naive or not. And to our surprise, and I think to the vet's surprise at the MRC, we found that at least 5 of the 10 horses that we tested actually had some kind of previous exposure or were seropositive. But more than likely this is due to the fact that they had been previously vaccinated with the live attenuated vaccine. And there was these horses, there was no history really of their no vaccination history, so I guess they didn't know. Anyway, what was much more important was when we sent them for the virus neutralization titer assays, that none of them were positive. So that was a good thing. So we decided to go ahead with the thing anyway. And I've got here serotype 4 and 5 VLPs by this stage, or at a much later stage, we actually managed to make VLPs representing serotype 4 as well. So I've included that in here. Essentially, we decided to purify the VLPs using 2 different methods, and the reason for this was because purification using a density gradient is not very practical, it's not scalable if you want to produce vaccine in large quantities. And so we subcontracted to CSIR to develop a method for us that was much more scalable and akin to the method used in a lot of other vaccine preparation industries. So we purified ours using the density gradient, and the CSIR purified our same VLPs using depth filtration, which is basically a series of sort of layered filtration system, as well as tangential flow filtration and other sort of similar kind of thing. And our VLPs were prepared in PBS buffer and theirs in Vicene, mainly because they had also done some work previously and they preferred to work with this in this buffer, and we thought, well, we'll get 2 different answers and we can see whether it makes a difference. So here's a gel of our VLPs. We obviously need to do this to check that the VLPs, that the proteins were all there. And lovely VLP, serotype 5 VLPs and 4 VLPs. And the CSIR only did the serotype 5 VLPs because that was the only construct we had at the time. As you can see, these are a little bit more dirty. And if you look at the EM, there's also a few other sort of foreign-looking bodies in there. But altogether, they're actually not too bad. So the vaccination regimen, basically we have only managed to get sort of 2 horses per group. The first group had our idexonal density-gradient purified VLPs, serotype 5. We managed to get doses of 200 micrograms. The CSIR one, depth filtration and tangential flow, they only got 100 micrograms of VLPs because that's the highest concentration they could purify them to. We had 2 negative controls to account for the 2 different buffer systems we used. And then the last group was the serotype 4 VLPs, which were density gradients centrifuged, and we managed to get 200 microgram doses there. The horses had a prime intramuscular inoculation at day 0, and then at day 27 they had a boost inoculation. This is sort of based on previous, on sort of the literature really on what other trials have been performed. And then we managed to sample the horses which were vaccinated with serotype 5 VLPs 10 times across nearly 300 days. And because of the serotype 4 experiment started much later, we only managed to get 4 samples from that. And then the serum from all the horses was used for analysis. Just one other thing, this is sort of a repeat of what I've told you already, but I think it's quite important to mention that we adjuvanted our VLPs with something called PET gel A, which is sort of, it's like carbapenem, it's a very sort of polymer adjuvant, which is not meant to have any side effects on horses. And the other good thing about it is that you can add it at 5%, which is often a problem. If you have to add more adjuvant, you actually have to reduce the dose. So this is a very busy slide, but I'll take you through it slowly. Essentially, it's the virus neutralization assays, or the serum titers, that were measured for all the sera from all the horses. And for all of them, we tested them using virus serotype 5, 8, and 4. So if you look at the top there, when we tested against serotype 5, you look at the first two horses. Those are the serotype horses vaccinated with serotype 5 VLPs. We were very pleased to see after the boost that there was a huge spike in the antibodies, which then sort of tailed off slowly, sort of coming down to after 300 days. In the assay where we tested the same against the serotype 8 virus, again another very nice spike, also very pleasing because obviously now this is showing cross protection against serotype 8, and when we tested against serotype 4, there was no response, which is pretty much what we expected. So then if you look at the CSIR produced VLPs against serotype 5, there was definitely a boost or an increase in antibody titer, which sort of tailed off again, very similar to the previous one. A lot, or at least probably about half of what our titers were, but it's actually not surprising since they actually only got half the dose. Again, the same kind of thing for when we looked at serotype 8, so those ones were also cross-protecting. And interestingly, when we tested against virus serotype 4, there was actually, it looked like there is a boost. However, all these, the horses which have got the red dots on them are horses which were not naive. So we think that this response is essentially due to the fact that it's what one calls an anamnestic effect. Essentially, it's like a boosting effect of a previous inoculation. So that was quite interesting. And then we had a look at these are the negative controls. There's nothing happening, and when we looked at serotype 5, there was this odd sort of increase in the middle of nowhere when we tested against serotype 8. And we think it's possibly, it's sort of what we call background reading. It's not really anything that you can read into. And there was a similar thing down here when we tested against serotype 4. So I think normally one should probably have some kind of a threshold, a cutoff, where you can say, okay, when the titer is lower than X amount, then you can regard that as a negative response. Yeah, so in sorry, I'll just go to the next one, the last one. So then we looked at the serotype 4 VLPs, and that was quite interesting because we got nothing in serotype when we looked at the serotype 5 virus, and in the serotype 4 we got a very nice boost of the immune response. So essentially, if you're looking, I haven't got the titer figures up here, but if you look at them, the titers that we obtained were actually very similar to those obtained with the live attenuated vaccines. We were very pleased that we're actually sort of, it's not better, but it wasn't worse. And then the other thing we did was just to have a look at what antibodies were produced in response to the VLPs, with the VLP inoculation. Essentially, this shows that the pre-bleed, the serum prior to vaccination, and then in the serum taken on day 41. And you can see horses 1 to 4, all 4 antibodies to all 4 proteins were picked up, and the same goes for horse 9, horse 10. And this work was published in what was it, veterinary research, sort of at the end of last year. So the outcome really of vaccination was with the density gradient purified VLPs, there were absolutely no side effects with the prime inoculation. interestingly, with the BLPs that have been prepared using depth filtration and tangential flow, apparently the horses both developed slight neck stiffness for about 2 days, but it disappeared. And with the boost inoculation, there were no side effects observed at all. Body temperature of the horses was normal. There were no other side effects. And then obviously antibodies were produced to all form structural proteins. This is for in all cases. And serotype 4 VLPs, we got reaction against serotype 4, but not against the others. And serotype 5, we got against 5, and cross-protection against 8, but nothing against 4. So, in actual fact, this vaccine actually looks very promising. And obviously the next step now is to determine whether the vaccine actually protects once the animal has been challenged. Biggest problem with this is that there are no facilities in South Africa actually at the moment where we can do challenges. But we've actually managed to find a place in Lesotho, and we've also managed to get some money to do a challenge. So in other words, this means that you vaccinate the horses with serotype 5 and 4 VLPs, obviously test to check that it stimulated the immune response, and then you challenge the horses with their respective viruses. And we obviously want to do this with 4, 5 and 8, especially to see whether 5 cross-protects against 8. And this funding we've managed to secure has come from the government, from the DTI, as well as AfriVet, who are interested in sort of taking the development of the vaccine further, or I guess they would like to commercialize it if we ever get to a stage where we can. So further vaccine development that we're actually going to want to do in the laboratory is obviously now we have 3 serotypes represented. We've got serotype 4, we have serotype 5, and that cross-protects against serotype 8. So what we're going to do is try and work on serotype 1, which cross-protects against 2, 3, which cross-protects against 7, and 6, which against 9. There are also those, having said that, there are other factors that one has to take into account when developing the vaccine. The one is obviously looking at VLP stability. These VLPs seem to be very stable if you freeze them at -80, but obviously that's not very practical, and we need to look into the lyophilization of the VLPs and to see how they stand up to that. Another question is how effective is the vaccine? It's something we can obviously only answer once we've done a vaccine challenge trial, but apparently vaccine efficacy should be more than 70%. The other thing to look at is the dosing regimen. We showed that if you give a 100 microgram dose, you get a certain response. If you get double that dose, you get a slightly bigger response. But is the lower one better, or is the lower one sufficient? Again, the dosing regimen, I guess 1 dose is better than 2 doses, but we have to sort that out. And then the other thing apparently, which is very important, is that the onset of immunity occurs within 3 weeks of complete vaccination. And then lastly, I know that I said that the live attenuated vaccine is not that great in terms of being able to distinguish between infected and vaccinated animals. Well, obviously our VLP vaccine isn't either, because it also has VP7 in it. So what we're doing at the moment is having a look at other candidates, such as NS3 or 4 and VP6. So in other words, developing a diagnostic assay which utilizes these antigens, which you should not find the presence of in animals that have been vaccinated. And lastly, I'd just like to acknowledge the people that have been involved in developing this. Sue, here, who did most of the VLP work, and our EM unit, the people at the MRC who helped us with the horses, all the people who've done the virus neutralization assays and diagnostic assays, as well as our TIA and PRF and CSR who contributed funding towards the project. Thank you.